If Rachel disappeared tomorrow, would anyone even notice? That's what she said. It wasn't whispered. It wasn't muttered under breath or tossed off with a giggle. Lauren, my husband's sister, said it like a headline, loud enough to slice through the backyard chatter. Forks paused. A few chuckles surfaced, uneasy and quick. One of the uncles let out a breathy snort, like he'd been holding in something meaner. Daniel, my husband, sat beside me. His hand was resting on his thigh. When Lauren said it, I watched his knuckles twitch. Just once. He didn't say a word. That moment cracked something I didn't even know was still intact. Just 20 minutes earlier, I'd been in the kitchen arranging the peach cobbler I baked that morning. Fresh peaches, brown sugar crumble, butter just soft enough to sink in, but not run. It was my grandmother's recipe. Every summer BBQ I brought it. Every year it sat untouched while Lauren's neon-frosted cupcakes vanished like a magic trick. I'd told myself it didn't matter. I didn't make the cobbler for them. I made it for tradition, for memory. But as I stood there holding the tray, hearing her words still hanging in the air, I felt like I'd brought a hymn to a demolition site. My cheeks burned, but not from the Carolina heat. The backyard buzzed with summer, cicadas, clinking glasses, someone's playlist looping 90s country. I felt like I was underwater, watching it all from behind thick glass. Daniel sipped his drink. His eyes never moved from the table centerpiece. The worst part? I wasn't surprised. Lauren had always been a master of paper cuts, the queen of cruelty dressed in politeness. Back when Daniel and I first started dating, she called me low maintenance, like it was a compliment. At our wedding, her toast didn't mention my name once. Last Christmas, she joked about how a new haircut might open up my face. I'd laughed then too. I always did. But this wasn't just shade. She didn't insult me. She erased me. After the plates were cleared and the kids were playing barefoot on the grass, I slipped inside, claiming I needed more napkins. The kitchen was cool. The hum of the fridge felt like an anchor. I leaned against the counter and focused on breathing. Daniel followed a few minutes later. "You okay?" he asked, quieter than usual. "What do you think?" I replied, still facing the fridge. "She was joking." I turned and looked straight at him. "Do you think it was funny?" He paused. But you know how Lauren is." "I do. And I know how you are too," I said. "You let her be that way." His shoulders sagged like I'd just given him a burden he couldn't carry. "Come on, Rach, what do you want me to do? Start a scene at a barbecue?" "I wanted you to say something." I didn't want to make it worse. "It already was," I said. "You just didn't feel it." He didn't reply. That conversation, that moment, wasn't new. I'd had it with him before, just with different words. Later, as the sun dipped and the fire pit crackled to life, Lauren stood near the garden bed with a wine glass, retelling her yoga retreat story like it was a TED Talk. She caught my eye, smiled, and tilted her head, as if I were a stray she'd nearly stepped on. "Lauren," I said, voice calm but clear. She turned. "Can I talk to you for a second? Just us." She rolled her eyes. "This isn't about earlier, is it? Rachel, it was a joke." I didn't respond. I just walked toward the side yard, near the garage light. After a beat, she followed. Under the porch bulb, casting long shadows across her face, I looked her dead in the eye. "Do you actually think what you said was okay?" She let out a dry laugh. "You're still on that? You joked about me vanishing. That's not wit, that's venom." "You're reading too much into it." "No," I said, my voice even. "You've just gotten used to no one calling you on it." She crossed her arms. "God, you're sensitive." "Maybe, but I'd rather be sensitive than mean." That landed. Her face twitched, not in guilt, but in surprise, like she'd finally realized I was made of something more than silence. "I'm not going to be your target anymore," I added. "Next time you want to be clever, pick someone else." She didn't reply, just turned and walked off, her wine sloshing slightly as she left. That night when we got home, Daniel went straight to the shower. I stood in the kitchen, still holding the cobbler dish, barely touched, just like every year. I walked outside to the trash bin, lifted the foil, and dumped the whole thing, peaches, sugar, history, into the dark. Then I stood there, in the soft buzz of night, the summer air thick with the scent of burnt charcoal and something else. Clarity. That joke didn't end me. It finally woke me up. Have you ever laughed along just to survive the moment? I didn't sleep that night. Daniel lay beside me, breathing evenly in the dark. Meanwhile, my eyes traced the ceiling fan blades like they were spelling out everything I hadn't said. That joke, Lauren's joke, kept playing on a loop. If Rachel disappeared tomorrow, would anyone even notice? And no one had stopped her. Not even Daniel. By morning, I moved through the kitchen like a ghost in my own life. Measured, polite, functional. The toast burned. The coffee went cold. I poured it anyway. Daniel sat at the counter scrolling through his phone, humming a song I didn't recognize. To him, the barbecue was a blip in the past. To me, it was still happening, echoing in the marrow of my bones. "We need to talk about what she said," I told him. He looked up. "Who?" "Lauren." He hesitated, already tired. "Rachel, it was just a joke." I nodded once. "And you thought it was funny?" I didn't laugh. "You didn't stop it either." Daniel put his phone down and rubbed his face. "I didn't want to make it a whole thing in front of everyone." "You didn't want to be uncomfortable," I said, "so you let me stand there, alone." He turned to the sink. "Do we have to do this right now?" That hit harder than Lauren's insult. I watched him rinse a glass. His back was to me. Again. His silence. Again, doing all the talking. That afternoon, I drove to Lake Wiley. There's a trail with a bench that overlooks the water. I used to come here before we were married, before I became someone who took the hits quietly and kept smiling. The air was cooler by the water. Quiet. I opened my journal but didn't write anything. I just stared at the blank page like it might confess something for me. But I already knew. Lauren wasn't the root of this. Daniel was. He'd been standing next to me for 6 years. Warm, agreeable, conflict avoidant, and never once had he asked what it cost me to keep peace with his family. I'd smiled through sharpness. I'd swallowed discomfort like communion. I'd convinced myself that being low maintenance meant I was strong. But it hadn't made me strong. It had made me invisible. Eventually, I wrote 5 words across the top of the page. "I'm not disappearing, not yet." By Sunday, we were expected at brunch at his parents' house. Part of me wanted to lie. Migraine, flu, anything. But I went. Not for them, for clarity. Lauren greeted us like nothing happened. "Oh my God, Rach, love that color on you," she chirped. I smiled, slowly. "Thanks, it's called Visible. You should try it sometime." I took a sip of water and didn't break eye contact. Her smile twitched. Just for a second. During brunch, I refused to fade. I asked questions. I answered without waiting. I didn't pause. I created pause. It wasn't loud. It wasn't rude. It was presence. Undeniable, unignorable presence. Daniel glanced at me a few times. Once it looked like he wanted to say something, but he didn't. And for the first time, I didn't care. Because this wasn't about him choosing me over his sister. This was about me choosing myself. When Lauren made another little jab, this time about career women acting too busy to host, I looked her straight in the eye and said, "Maybe I've just been too busy making space for people who don't make space for me." No one laughed, not even Daniel. That evening, I washed the brunch dishes in silence. But it wasn't the kind of silence that swallows words. It was the kind that has nothing left to prove. The water was warm. The window cracked open just enough to let the spring air breathe through the room. I didn't rush. I didn't stall. I just moved like someone who'd stopped performing for applause that never came. Daniel came into the kitchen, drying his hands on a dish towel. "You okay?" he asked, softer than before. "I'm clear," I said. He nodded, but I saw it. The unease. Something had shifted, and he didn't know what it meant yet. I wasn't angry. I wasn't even sad. I was just done pretending smallness was strength. Later that night, I opened the drawer beneath the cutlery tray. Tucked between napkin rings and half-used birthday candles, I slid in a folded note. It wasn't a letter. It wasn't even addressed. Just a reminder, handwritten in ink. You don't have to disappear just to keep your seat at the table. Rachel stood in the hallway holding a towel, watching Daniel slip into the bedroom like nothing was broken. He didn't close the door. He didn't look back. That silence echoed louder than Lauren's insult. 3 months earlier. It was Easter Sunday. Lauren hosted brunch in her newly remodeled kitchen, and everything was Instagram ready. Rachel brought fresh blueberry scones and a spinach quiche she'd made from scratch. Lauren greeted her with a smile that didn't touch her eyes. "You went homemade again? So ambitious." Rachel smiled. "Thought I'd switch it up." "You always try so hard," Lauren replied, sipping her mimosa. The words hung in the air just long enough to sting. Daniel overheard, but just nodded at Rachel like, "Don't start." That was Lauren's signature move, passive jabs dipped in social grace, and Daniel's was keeping peace by pretending not to notice. 6 months earlier. Daniel's parents celebrated their 40th anniversary with a family dinner at the lake house. Rachel had curated a photo collage of the entire Monroe family over the years, edited and printed with handwritten notes. Lauren brought a wine rack. As their in-laws opened the gifts, Lauren gestured toward Rachel's. "Well, at least one of these will last longer than a photo." Laughter followed. Even Daniel cracked a grin. Rachel stayed quiet. 2 years earlier. It was Thanksgiving, the first one Rachel had hosted at their place. She made her grandmother's caramel pumpkin pie and placed it at the center of the table. Lauren walked by and said, "I thought you'd buy dessert this year. Save yourself the trouble." "I didn't mind baking," Rachel said. "That's your problem," Lauren replied. "You never mind being in the background." That time, no one laughed. No one said a word. Daniel wasn't in the room. Rachel never forgot these moments. She hadn't collected them intentionally, but they'd formed a chain all the same. Lauren's words, Daniel's silence, and the weight of always choosing composure over self-defense. By the time Lauren made that disappearing joke at the BBQ, it wasn't the first offense, it was the final confirmation. Lauren hadn't slipped. She'd simply said what everyone had always believed. Rachel didn't matter. Present day. Rachel sat at the kitchen table, a legal pad in front of her, the lines still blank. Daniel walked in, phone in hand, then set it down slowly. "Can we talk?" he asked. She nodded. He sat across from her. "I've been thinking about everything. The BBQ, what Lauren said." She said nothing. She'd said enough. This was his turn. "You're right," he began. "I should have said something. I just didn't want to make it worse." Rachel's gaze didn't waver. "Worse for who?" He hesitated. "You? The family?" "No," she said. "Worse for you." He looked down. "You didn't want the discomfort, so you let me sit in it instead. That's not loyalty, Daniel. That's convenience." His face crumpled just slightly. "I didn't know it hurt you that much." "That's the part that hurts the most," she replied. "You didn't know. You've been next to me all these years and didn't know." He rubbed his palms together. "I didn't think Lauren meant it. Not really." "She meant every word," Rachel said. "And if she didn't, she still said them. And you still didn't stop her." She stood and walked to the sink. "I don't want an apology because you feel bad now. I want to know who you are when it counts." Daniel didn't respond. Maybe he couldn't yet. That night, after he went to bed, Rachel stayed at the kitchen table and made a list. What I've tolerated. Being mocked for what I brought. Smiling through Lauren's insults. Sitting quietly while others laughed. Daniel choosing peace over partnership. Never being defended, only dismissed. What I want. A voice that doesn't need permission. A marriage with backbone, not silence. Boundaries I don't have to beg for. Love that feels like protection. Space to breathe, not shrink. When she was done, she didn't cry. She folded the paper and slipped it into the drawer beneath the cutlery tray, right between the napkin rings and the birthday candles, where the things that mattered quietly lived. The following Monday, the house felt different, not in some grand, dramatic way, but in the quiet moments, in the way Daniel avoided eye contact over coffee, or how he lingered in the driveway before leaving for work. A different kind of silence had crept in. It wasn't peaceful, it was loaded. Rachel noticed everything. She always had. They didn't fight. There were no slammed doors or raised voices, but the air between them was tight with what hadn't been said, and it was clear now. Daniel was uncomfortable not because of Lauren's insult, but because Rachel had stopped pretending it didn't bother her. That was new. On Wednesday, Rachel met her friend Marcy for lunch at a cafe downtown. Marcy had known her since college, sharp, intuitive, and unafraid to say things out loud. "You okay?" she asked as soon as they sat. Rachel stirred her iced tea. "Define okay." Marcy tilted her head. "How's Daniel?" Rachel shrugged. "Still quiet." "That bad?" Rachel hesitated. "He's not mean. He's just not there. Not when I needed him to be." Marcy nodded, then leaned in. "You ever notice how women like us are told we're too sensitive the moment we have standards?" That landed harder than Rachel expected. That evening, Daniel came home late and dropped his keys into the dish by the door like he always did. Rachel was on the couch with her laptop, editing a photo shoot. He paused. "You didn't wait for dinner?" She looked up. "I didn't know if you'd be back in time." "I texted." "No, you didn't." He blinked, pulled out his phone, checked, realized she was right. "Oh," he said. She closed her laptop. "You know what I keep thinking about?" He looked wary. "What?" "The way you went still. At the barbecue. When Lauren said it. You didn't even look at me." Daniel exhaled through his nose. "I didn't know what to do." "You do now?" He sat down across from her, rubbing the back of his neck. "I think I froze. I didn't expect her to say something like that." "She's been saying things like that for years," Rachel said. "You just didn't notice, or didn't want to." Daniel looked down at his hands. "I hate conflict, Rach. You know that." "I know, and I've made myself smaller to protect you from it." That sentence settled between them like a dropped plate, silent, sharp, undeniable. The next morning, Rachel woke early. She brewed coffee, packed Daniel's lunch, and set it on the counter without a word. It was a habit she hadn't questioned in years, and for the first time it felt odd, like it belonged to someone else. She wasn't angry. She was awakening. After he left, she sat at the kitchen table with her journal. She didn't write anything new. She reread the list. What I've tolerated. What I want. Each line felt truer now, like bricks she was standing on instead of walls she was trapped behind. On Friday night, they attended a birthday dinner for Daniel's cousin. The whole family was there, including Lauren. Rachel hadn't seen her since the barbecue. Lauren greeted her with a too-sweet smile. "Rach, long time, no see? You good now?" Rachel tilted her head. "Define good." Lauren's smile twitched, but she recovered quickly. "I was just teasing you that day. Hope you didn't take it personally." Rachel's eyes didn't blink. "No worries. I'm just learning to treat people the way they treat me." Daniel was standing beside her. He heard every word, and he said nothing. The dinner table was long and loud. Conversation spun around Rachel like wind. She kept her posture calm, her voice measured. She didn't snap. She didn't retreat. But when Lauren interrupted her mid-sentence to tell a story about someone's dog, Rachel didn't wait. "I wasn't finished." Everyone went quiet. Lauren blinked. "Oh, sorry." Rachel smiled. "It's okay. I'm not disappearing this time." Daniel looked at her like he'd never quite seen her before. Later that night in the car, Daniel broke the silence. "You were different tonight." Rachel looked out the window. "Was I?" "Yeah, sharper, stronger." She didn't respond. The compliment felt off, like he admired the performance, not the reason for it. After a long pause, he added, "I'm proud of you." And finally, Rachel turned to him. "Don't be proud of me," she said. "Be with me." The light turned green. They drove on in silence. That weekend, Rachel made changes, small ones. She pulled her baking tools from the back of the cabinet and boxed them. She cleared the top shelf in the hall closet for her own projects. She took down a family photo from the living room wall, the one where Lauren had moved in front of her just as the camera clicked, and replaced it with a watercolor painting she'd done years ago. It wasn't rebellion, it was reclamation. She started speaking up in other ways too, at work, with friends, even with herself. She stopped apologizing for not replying to texts right away. She stopped cushioning every opinion with a disclaimer. She stopped explaining why she didn't want to attend every family gathering. She wasn't rude, she was clear, and Daniel noticed. One night, he came into the living room and said, "I don't know who you are lately." Rachel looked up from her book. "I'm exactly who I was. You're just seeing it now." He didn't know how to answer that, and she didn't need him to. Rachel stood in front of the dryer, folding Daniel's t-shirts with the methodical muscle memory of routine. She didn't think. Her hands just moved. Fold, smooth, stack. Fold, smooth, stack. She paused on the last one. It was the shirt he'd worn the night of the barbecue. She hadn't washed it since. The faint scent of charcoal and cologne still lingered in the fabric. Familiar, domestic, safe. But something about it made her stomach knot. She folded it a little too hard and placed it at the bottom of the pile. They hadn't had a real conversation in 5 days. Not a fight, not silence, just surface-level check-ins. "Want coffee? What time are you back tonight? Did you feed the dog?" Everything that mattered went unspoken. Daniel was always just 5 steps behind her in every room lately, near but never connected, watching her as if waiting for a cue that everything was fine again. Rachel didn't give it, because things weren't fine, and she wasn't going back to pretending. That Friday morning, she found herself standing by the hallway mirror again. She looked fine, normal, put together, but behind the mascara and cardigan was someone watching herself from a distance. It hit her then, how much of her marriage had been spent performing ease, smiling when Lauren jabbed her, laughing when no one else noticed, making herself small so others didn't have to feel bad. She pulled out her phone. Note title, "What I Needed That I Never Got." Backup when I was humiliated. Recognition of how much I bent. Acknowledgement, not excuses. Partnership in private and in public. One person who wouldn't laugh when I disappeared. Later that afternoon, Daniel texted, "Let's get dinner tonight. Just us." She stared at the message. Not because she didn't want to go, but because the phrasing made it sound like a date, not a reckoning. Still, she replied, "Sure." Sil? They sat across from each other at a quiet Italian place, cloth napkins, candlelight, safe distance from any familiar faces. Daniel fidgeted with his silverware. "You look beautiful tonight." Rachel nodded politely. "Thank you." They ordered, sipped wine, talked about work, the weather, a show they'd started 3 months ago and never finished. But Rachel didn't want to talk about the surface, so she cut straight through it. "Do you remember what Lauren said that night?" He looked up slowly. "Of course I do." "And what did you feel?" He paused. "Honestly? Embarrassed? Shocked?" "Embarrassed for who?" Daniel hesitated. "That's what I thought," Rachel said quietly. He leaned in. "Rachel, I didn't know what to say. I froze." "No," she said. "You didn't freeze. You opted out. You chose comfort." Daniel's jaw tensed. "You think I wanted that to happen?" But you made sure it wasn't your problem." He looked away. The server brought their entrees. Rachel barely touched hers. She continued softly, "Do you know what it's like to be erased in front of a crowd and look around for someone, just one person, to stand with you, and see the person you love looking at his plate instead?" Daniel opened his mouth, closed it. "I don't need you to be perfect," she added. "I needed you to choose me." "I do choose you," he said. She shook her head. You choose peace, and you expect me to play along. When they got home, Daniel sat on the edge of the bed, rubbing his hands together like he was trying to warm something that had long gone cold. Rachel went to the linen closet and pulled out a box of frames she hadn't touched in over a year. She sifted through them until she found the one from their first holiday with the Monroe family. She remembered that day so clearly, how Lauren had pushed her aside during the group photo to make room for her husband's cousin. Rachel had laughed, smiled anyway, like a good guest. Now she looked at the photo again. She wasn't even in it, just the edge of her shoulder. She slid the frame out, removed the photo, and placed it in the back of the drawer. It didn't deserve a spot on the wall. On Saturday, Rachel met her friend Marcy for coffee. They sat outside in the sun, sipping iced drinks and sharing quiet. Marcy was one of the few people Rachel never had to pretend for. You look different, Marcy said. Do I? Yeah, like someone who's finally asking the right questions. Rachel smiled faintly. I think I spent years managing other people's comfort, including Daniel's. I didn't even notice how much of myself I gave up to do it. Marcy nodded. What changed? Rachel took a deep breath. I'm tired of managing everything except my own needs. That night, Rachel couldn't sleep. She sat on the couch, legs curled under her, journal open in her lap. She turned to a fresh page and wrote, What broke me wasn't what she said. It was watching the man I chose choose silence. It was realizing the person who knew me best. Let someone else rewrite me in front of a room full of people. And didn't even flinch. It wasn't the insult, it was the echo, and how he let it ring. She put the pen down and stared at the page until the words blurred. Then she stood, walked to the hall closet, and pulled down a small canvas bag. Inside it were backup keys, old letters, and one folded piece of paper, the list. She unfolded it, read it again, then placed it beside the journal. Not out of anger, but as a reminder of the work still ahead. It was a Tuesday, plain and unremarkable. The sky was overcast, the kind of day that made everything feel muted, like the world was half asleep. Rachel sat in her car outside Daniel's office. She hadn't planned to be there, just dropped off some dry cleaning nearby and, without thinking, found herself idling in the parking lot. Watching, waiting. It wasn't suspicion that brought her there. It wasn't paranoia. It was a quiet curiosity. Who was he outside of her? Who was he when she wasn't cushioning every encounter, smoothing every wrinkle? Daniel came out around noon with 2 co-workers. He laughed at something one of them said, light and unburdened. He looked uncomplicated. That's what struck her the most. He was free of the emotional calculus she'd been doing for years. Back at home, Rachel stood in the pantry, looking for the rice. Her hand hovered over a jar of lentils. She didn't need lentils. She just didn't want to make another decision. Something inside her went still. She'd done it again. The thing she always did. The thing no one ever asked for, but everyone expected. Made herself small. She realized in that moment that she'd curated her entire life around the idea of avoiding discomfort, not hers, other people's. She put the lentils back, then took them down again, just because she wanted to, because maybe what she wanted mattered, even in the smallest ways. That night, they had dinner at home. Nothing special. Chicken, roasted vegetables, sparkling water. She watched Daniel eat. He was relaxed, oblivious, half scrolling through his phone between bites. Rachel set her fork down. "Can I ask you something?" she said. Daniel looked up. "Sure." "When we first met, do you remember what you liked about me?" He smiled. "Yeah, of course. You were kind, patient. You made everything easy." Rachel nodded slowly. "Do you ever wonder what that cost me?" He blinked. "What do you mean?" "All that patience, all that ease. It didn't come from nowhere." Daniel's smile faded. "I don't think I ever saw it that way." "That's the point," she said. "You didn't have to." They didn't argue, but the air grew thick again, like fog pressing down on the furniture. Later, while Daniel watched TV, Rachel went upstairs and opened her closet. She pulled out a dusty box labeled office supplies. Inside were half-used journals, unopened pens, and a folder of personal essays she'd written before they were married. One piece was titled, "The Art of Disappearing Without Dying." She didn't even remember writing it. She read it all. It wasn't about death. It was about emotional vanishing, about shrinking so no one would ever call you difficult, about smiling through invalidation because your survival depended on it being no big deal. And she'd been practicing it long before Daniel. The barbecue wasn't the beginning, it was the breaking point. 2 days later, she met Marcy again. They walked a trail behind the old library. Spring was blooming in soft pastels, dogwoods, cherry blossoms, tulips opening without apology. Rachel told her everything. Marcy didn't interrupt, just listened, nodding occasionally. "Do you think he can change?" Rachel finally asked. Marcy exhaled. "I think the better question is, does he want to?" Rachel stayed quiet. Marcy added, "Loving someone doesn't mean shrinking to fit the space they offer. It means making space together. If he's not willing to make room for you, then you'll just keep bending." Rachel kicked a stone on the path. "I've been bending for years." "I know," Marcy said. "The question is, do you even remember what it feels like to stand tall?" That night, Rachel asked Daniel if he'd go to therapy with her. He looked surprised. "Like, couples counseling?" "Yes." "Do you think we're that bad off?" "I think we're honest enough to admit we don't know how to do this better without help." Daniel nodded slowly. "Okay, yeah, I'll go." She didn't thank him. It wasn't a favor. It was step 1. At their first session, the therapist, an older woman with quiet strength and sharp eyes, asked them to describe what brought them in. Daniel looked at Rachel. She didn't flinch. "I stopped recognizing myself in this marriage," she said, "and when I found myself again, I realized how much I had faded to keep things calm." The therapist turned to Daniel. "What's your reaction to hearing that?" He swallowed. "I always thought she was just easy, chill. I didn't realize she was disappearing." Rachel's eyes stung, not because he said it, but because it was the first time he actually saw it. Over the next few weeks, they went back every Wednesday evening. Sometimes it was brutal. Rachel would speak, and Daniel would sit in silence, stunned by the inventory of pain he'd never noticed. Other times he would speak, trying to explain how he truly didn't see it, how he thought low maintenance was a compliment. It wasn't linear. There were awkward rides home, quiet dinners, nights where they didn't touch, and nights where they cried together. But each session gave Rachel more breath. She was taking up space again, and this time no one rolled their eyes or sighed or told her to relax. Not even Daniel. One night lying in bed, Daniel whispered, "You're not who I married." Rachel turned to him calmly. "I know," she said. "Thank God." He was quiet for a moment. "I think I'm starting to love this version even more." Rachel didn't smile. She didn't swoon. She just nodded. She had learned to love this version of herself too, and this time, she wouldn't trade her voice for peace. The first thing Rachel ever said to Daniel, years ago at a mutual friend's party, was, "Sorry, am I in your way?" He'd smiled, told her she wasn't, and they talked for 20 minutes about music and movies and how much they both hated networking events. But looking back now, Rachel remembered that moment not for the spark, but for the script. "Sorry. Am I in your way?" It was instinct, trained reflex. Say sorry first. Apologize for standing, for speaking, for existing in the wrong space at the wrong time. And until now, she hadn't realized how much that first word had followed her through their entire relationship. She thought about that reflex again during their third therapy session. The therapist asked them to describe how they handled conflict. Daniel said, "We don't really fight. She's always been the one to de-escalate." Rachel had smiled, but not because it was flattering. "I always apologized first," she said, turning to face Daniel. "Even when I didn't do anything wrong. I couldn't stand the silence. I couldn't stand the discomfort. So I'd fold." Daniel looked genuinely surprised. "I didn't know you felt that way." "I didn't say it," she replied. "I just said, I'm sorry, even when I wasn't." At home that night, Rachel stood at the bathroom sink brushing her teeth. Daniel leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. "You really felt like that all the time?" he asked quietly. She spat, rinsed, wiped her mouth. "Yeah," she said, "and I didn't even resent you for it. Not then. I thought it was love. That bending meant I was good at compromise. That swallowing feelings meant I was mature." Daniel stepped closer. "But now I know that wasn't compromise, that was surrender." He didn't argue. She appreciated that. The next day, Rachel went through her inbox to find an old email she remembered from early in their marriage, an apology she'd written to Lauren after a minor misunderstanding about who was bringing dessert to Christmas dinner. Rachel had brought a pie, Lauren had brought a cake. There was no drama, no complaints, until the next day, when Lauren texted Daniel saying Rachel was trying to upstage her. Rachel, ever the peacemaker, had emailed Lauren the next morning. "Hey, Lauren. I'm so sorry if I made anything awkward yesterday. I didn't mean to step on your toes at all. I just wanted to bring something homemade. Totally my fault. I should have double-checked. Hope we're okay." Reading it now made Rachel's stomach turn. It wasn't just the apology. It was the tone, the overcorrection, the deference. Lauren had replied, one line, "It's fine. Just communicate next time. No punctuation, no warmth, just permission to stay in the background." Rachel had thanked her. That evening, Rachel brought it up to Daniel. "I found that email I sent Lauren years ago, the one after the pie thing." He groaned. "God, I remember that. You were so nice about it." "I shouldn't have been." He looked at her. She completely overreacted. "You didn't say that then." "I didn't want to make it worse." Rachel sighed. "I already lived in worse. You just didn't see it." Daniel sat back. "So what now? You want me to confront her about every past thing?" "No," she said. "I want you to stop thinking silence is neutral. It's not. Silence always sides with power." A few days later, Rachel made dinner and invited her younger sister Ava over. Ava had always admired Rachel's calm. She said it with love, but also like a challenge. "You're the one who always keeps it together." It used to feel like a compliment. Now it felt like a warning. Over dinner, Ava mentioned how tired she was of always being the one to mediate between their parents. "Mom snaps, Dad clams up, and I'm just stuck in the middle, smoothing it over." Rachel gave her a look. "You don't have to keep doing that," she said. "You don't owe them that kind of peacekeeping." Ava blinked. "But if I don't, everything explodes." Rachel nodded. "Sometimes things need to." That night, Rachel sat with her journal again. Old apologies I didn't owe. For speaking too long at dinner. For forgetting to text back right away. For not laughing at a cruel joke. For bringing dessert. For existing in a way that made others uncomfortable. New boundaries I won't apologize for. Saying no without a reason. Speaking up when I'm interrupted. Not cushioning every truth. Taking time for myself. Making people feel accountable, not just comfortable. She read it aloud to herself, softly, like an oath. The following Sunday, they visited Daniel's parents again. It was a casual lunch. Lauren was there, of course, already sipping her second mimosa. As they sat down, Lauren joked, "Glad you could make it, Rachel." I was half expecting a dramatic exit again. Rachel didn't flinch. Instead, she leaned forward just enough to be heard. "You can't provoke me into disappearing anymore, Lauren." The room went still. No one laughed. Daniel looked up. Not at Rachel, but at Lauren. "Seriously?" he said. "You're still doing this?" Lauren opened her mouth, then closed it. Daniel added, "Let it go. You've said enough." In the car ride home, Rachel didn't speak. Daniel did. "I've been thinking about what you said, about silence not being neutral." She glanced at him. "I used to think being quiet kept things calm, but I was just making it your problem. I'm sorry for that." Rachel didn't rush to comfort him. She didn't say, "It's okay." Instead, she nodded. "Thank you." And that was enough. Later that night, Daniel found a note on his pillow. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't long. Just a small folded paper, handwritten in her neat print. "I used to be the one who always apologized. I'm not anymore, but I still believe in forgiveness, especially when it's asked for." He stared at it for a long time, then walked downstairs and found her in the kitchen. He didn't say anything, just pulled her into a quiet, deliberate hug. She let herself stay there for a moment, then pulled back, just enough to breathe. Rachel stared at the crumpled receipt in her hand, a gas station coffee and a pack of gum. Nothing remarkable, except it marked the first time in weeks Daniel had left the house early without telling her where he was going. It wasn't suspicious. Not exactly. It was just new, and new things carried weight now because the old habits had meant predictability. Predictability had once felt safe, but safety, she now knew, had sometimes masked indifference. She dropped the receipt in the trash and turned to face the rest of the morning. 3 days had passed since Daniel had stood up to Lauren. 3 days since his voice, firm, public, unshakable, interrupted the pattern that had always defined Rachel's place in the Monroe family. "Seriously? You're still doing this?" he'd said. And Lauren, for once, had no comeback. Rachel had felt it, the moment the room turned, not away from her but toward her, and toward him. But the high didn't last, because now the question pulsed under her skin. Why now? Why did it take 7 years of marriage, years of insults, erasures, jokes that landed like slaps, for Daniel to finally say something? That evening, Rachel sat across from Daniel at the kitchen table. They weren't eating, just occupying space. "I keep thinking about what you said to her," she began. Daniel looked up. "Yeah?" "I appreciated it," she said. "Really." He exhaled, like he'd been waiting for confirmation. "I meant it." "I know." She paused, searching his face. "But you've seen this happen before, and you didn't speak then." Daniel's eyes dropped. "I didn't realize how deep it went." She nodded. "That's the part that's hard. I kept hoping someone would finally see how much it hurt. But now that you do, I'm not sure if it changes anything." Daniel leaned in. "I want it to." "I know," Rachel said. "But I wanted it to for years. Alone." Later that night, Rachel stood in the doorway of their bedroom, watching him read a news article on his phone. "I think I stopped trusting you without even realizing it," she said softly. Daniel looked up slowly. "Because of Lauren?" "No," she said. "Because you let me fade." He put the phone down. "I never wanted you to." "That's the thing," Rachel said. "It was never about what you wanted. It was about what you allowed." The next afternoon, she met Marcy for coffee at the park. The wind was just turning warm. Trees bloomed pink and white like an apology. Rachel explained what had happened at the family lunch, how Daniel had defended her, how it had felt both monumental and too late. Marcy sipped her drink. "Do you believe him now?" "I believe he means it," Rachel said. "But that doesn't undo the years when I needed it and got silence." "Maybe it's not about undoing," Marcy replied. "Maybe it's about deciding what you need now and whether he's willing to give that version of support." Rachel nodded slowly. "I think I need to see if he can be consistent." That weekend, Lauren texted Daniel. "Didn't mean to cause drama. Hope we're good. Let's move on?" He showed Rachel the message without hesitation. "What do I say?" he asked. She didn't answer right away. Then, "What do you think you should say?" He looked down, thoughtful for once. "I think I should tell her that moving on doesn't mean pretending nothing happened, and that it's not just your job to take the hit anymore." Rachel nodded. "That's a start." He typed slowly. Sent it. No emoji, no qualifiers. Progress. That Sunday they went for a drive, windows down, music low, no destination in mind. Rachel glanced at him, sunlight casting streaks across his arms. He looked relaxed, and for the first time in a while, she didn't feel invisible in the passenger seat. You ever think about what we would have been like if we'd had these conversations earlier? She asked. All the time, Daniel said. And? I think I took you for granted, he said, because you were so good at making everything look easy. Rachel looked out the window. It wasn't easy. I know that now. They pulled off at a hiking trail and walked in silence for a while. Rachel picked up a twig and broke it absent-mindedly as they followed the curve of the path. At the overlook, she stopped. This is where I used to go when I needed to remember who I was, she said. Before us. Daniel stood beside her, quiet. I want to trust you again, she said. I want to believe this shift isn't temporary. He looked at her directly. What do I need to do to show you it's real? She thought for a moment. Speak up before I have to disappear, she said. Every time, not just when it's loud and public. Do it when it's small, when it's quiet, when no one else would notice but me. He nodded. She reached for his hand. That night, they lay in bed side by side, neither touching nor avoiding it. Rachel felt more grounded, not because everything was fixed, but because nothing was hidden. Daniel whispered, I'm sorry I was late. Rachel turned her head. Thank you for being here now. The next morning, Rachel woke before the sun. She poured coffee, packed her bag, and drove to a bookstore she loved but hadn't visited in years. She sat in the corner, notebook open. She began writing a new list, not about what she'd lost, but what she'd reclaimed. What I'm rebuilding. My voice, my boundaries, my peace, my standards. My trust, earned, not assumed. She didn't write his name on the list, but she knew he was part of the rebuild. If he could keep showing up, Rachel stood in the kitchen doorway, watching the steam rise from her coffee cup on the counter. Morning light slanted through the blinds, painting soft stripes across the hardwood. She didn't reach for the cup. She just watched it sit there, warming the air, slowly cooling. She'd been doing that a lot lately, watching, waiting, not reacting too fast. Not because she was uncertain, but because she was learning how to let herself feel before she moved. For years, she'd skipped that step. React, apologize, shrink. That was her old rhythm. It had cost her more than she realized. It had taken nearly a decade of marriage to understand that her silence wasn't keeping the peace. It was slowly erasing her. Rachel had kept a mental catalog of every moment she swallowed her discomfort. When Lauren insulted her, when Daniel let it slide, when someone interrupted her mid-thought and she smiled instead of finishing. Each time she gave up a sliver of herself to maintain harmony. And the world rewarded her for it. She was easy, uncomplicated, a joy to have around. But no one asked who she was underneath the accommodation. At their next therapy session, the counselor leaned in gently. Rachel, what does silence mean to you? She didn't answer right away. Then, it means survival. The therapist nodded. In what way? Rachel took a breath. If I didn't speak up, I couldn't be rejected for saying the wrong thing. If I stayed quiet, I couldn't be accused of causing problems. I thought silence made me safer. Daniel shifted beside her. And now? The therapist asked. Rachel turned to look at him. Now, I think silence made me disappear. After the session, they walked to the car in silence. Daniel finally spoke. I didn't realize how much you were giving up just to keep things from boiling over. Rachel nodded. I know, because I never showed it. She paused at the passenger door, but that wasn't kindness. That was fear. Daniel reached for her hand. She let him, but she didn't say anything. Not yet. That weekend, Rachel went to visit her mother, just for the afternoon. They sat on the porch with tea and shortbread cookies, the air heavy with spring rain waiting to fall. Her mother looked over at her, eyes narrowed with concern. You seem different, she said. Rachel smiled. I am. Her mother hesitated. Is everything okay with Daniel? Rachel didn't rush to reassure her. We're working through some things, she said. And for once, I'm not ignoring what I feel. Her mother looked surprised. You've always been so calm. I'm still calm, Rachel said. I'm just not silent. Driving home, Rachel thought about the first time she'd stayed silent in that house, her childhood home. She remembered being 8, sitting at the dinner table as her father snapped at her mother for forgetting to record a football game. Her mother said nothing, just nodded, took the blame, changed the subject. Rachel had learned it then. Keep the peace. Don't stir anything. Say sorry fast, even when it's not your fault. And for years, that training made her easy to live with, easy to overlook, easy to ignore, but not anymore. On Monday morning, Rachel woke up before the alarm. She padded down the stairs, made coffee, and sat at the kitchen table with a pen. No lists this time. Just a letter. Dear younger me, I'm sorry I made silence your shield. I told you it was your best option, that it kept you safe, loved, accepted. But you were never meant to disappear. You were allowed to have opinions, anger, needs. You were allowed to take up space. You still are, and I promise I won't let you be erased again. She didn't sign it. She didn't need to. That evening, Daniel came home early. I canceled dinner with my parents, he said. Told them we needed some time. Rachel raised an eyebrow. You okay? I'm figuring it out, he said. But I wanted to talk to you. About everything. About how I used to rely on your silence to keep things smooth. She sat down with him at the table. I think I didn't know how to handle discomfort, he said, so I let you take the hits, because you made it look like you could handle anything. Rachel's throat tightened. I could, but that doesn't mean I should have had to. Daniel nodded. I know. They sat there for a long time, the clock ticking, no television playing, no background music. Just truth. The next day, Rachel met with her boss for a quarterly check-in. He praised her work, her organization, her chill demeanor under pressure. She smiled, thanked him, and then for the first time added, I've realized that being calm shouldn't mean being invisible. I'd like to take more leadership in meetings. I have ideas, and I want to use them. Her boss blinked. Of course, that's a great idea. Later, in the elevator, she felt the tiniest thrill run through her. She hadn't apologized once. That evening, she found Daniel on the couch reading. She sat beside him. I stood up for myself today, she said. He looked over, smiling. Good. Tell me. She told him, not just the story, but how it felt, powerful, earned, a little scary. He listened, then said something unexpected. I'm proud of you. And this time, she believed him. Not because he said it, but because he finally meant it. The worst part wasn't what Lauren had said at the barbecue. It was everything Rachel hadn't said back. If you disappeared tomorrow, Lauren had laughed, wine in hand, no one would even notice. The words were sharp, but it was Rachel's silence that had made them stick, made them true in everyone else's eyes. Rachel had stood there, holding a tray of watermelon slices, frozen in place. She hadn't dropped it. She hadn't stormed out. She hadn't even blinked. She'd just smiled, turned away, and made sure the drinks were refilled. Because that was her role. Because she thought staying silent made her strong. It was only later, weeks later, when she began to understand. Silence isn't just absence. It's complicity. And Lauren's cruelty hadn't taken root because it was so clever or shocking. It had survived because no one challenged it, because the quiet made it safe, even hers. Rachel stood in front of the mirror that morning, brushing her hair with slow strokes, her eyes fixed not on her reflection, but on the version of herself she used to be. She could see that woman clearly now, kind, gentle, polite to a fault, always worried about causing a ripple, always managing everyone else's reactions. Her fingers paused mid-brush. She'd let Lauren's words sit unchallenged for years, not just the comment at the barbecue, but all the smaller cuts. I don't know how you deal with that hair. It's so much. Daniel probably just likes that you don't complain much. Some of us are just more social, I guess. And Rachel had smiled. Every time. Not because it didn't hurt, but because she'd convinced herself that conflict made things worse. What she didn't realize was, her silence made it possible. She brought it up in therapy. They sat in the softly lit room, chairs angled slightly toward one another, the space between them held by someone trained to handle the weight of long-held truths. Rachel leaned forward. "I let it happen," she said. Daniel looked confused. "Let what happen?" "She talked about me like I didn't matter. And I let her. I gave her the silence she needed to keep going." Daniel opened his mouth, then closed it. "I kept thinking, if I said something it would start a fight," she continued. "But it was already a fight. I just wasn't swinging." That weekend, Rachel took a walk alone. Not the kind she used to take, to clear her head, to cry quietly, to reset. This one had a destination. Lauren's. They hadn't spoken directly since the last family lunch, when Daniel had stepped in for the first time. Rachel hadn't spoken to her without Daniel present in almost a year. But this wasn't about Daniel. She rang the bell. Lauren answered, surprised but still trying to look composed. "Oh, hey." Rachel didn't waste time. "I'm not here to make peace," she said. "I'm here to make it clear." Lauren crossed her arms. "Okay." "For years, I let you talk to me like I didn't matter. I laughed, I smiled, I helped clean up. But what I should have said, what I should have screamed, was that I saw you, I heard you, and I knew exactly what you were doing." Lauren blinked. Rachel took a breath. "You've made being cruel look like confidence, and I let you. But that ends today." Lauren scoffed, but it was weaker than usual. "I was just joking. You always take things too personally." Rachel stepped forward. "You hide behind jokes because the truth is ugly when it's spoken plain, but I'm done laughing." She turned and walked away. For the first time in her life, Rachel didn't feel small in Lauren's presence. She didn't feel erased. She felt tall. She told Daniel what had happened later that night. He sat on the couch, stunned. "You actually went over there?" Rachel nodded. "I didn't ask for an apology. I didn't need one." He looked at her. "I'm proud of you." She gave a small smile. "I'm proud of me too." Then added, "But I wish I hadn't waited so long." Daniel nodded slowly. "Me too." And they sat there together, not trying to rewrite the past, but honoring that it finally changed. The next morning, Rachel met with her manager at work. They were discussing a client pitch, and one of the senior associates cut Rachel off mid-sentence. She paused, then picked right back up. "As I was saying, the timeline should reflect not just our delivery, but the client's internal approval process." The man looked startled but didn't interrupt again. Her manager smiled. "Good point, Rachel. Glad you jumped back in." She was too. It wasn't just about Lauren anymore. It was about all the moments she'd lost a piece of herself by staying quiet, at home, at work, in friendships. No more. That evening, Rachel sat on the patio with Daniel. The sun was low, throwing streaks of amber across the fence. She sipped her tea, calm but awake in a way she hadn't been in years. "Do you think we'd still be here if I hadn't changed?" she asked. Daniel thought for a moment. "I think I would have kept thinking things were fine, and you would have kept bleeding under your breath." She nodded. "And that would have killed us." He reached for her hand. "I'm sorry I didn't speak up sooner." She squeezed his fingers. "I'm sorry I let your silence be enough." That night, she wrote in her journal, "I thought being quiet made me strong, but it made others comfortable while I disappeared. Her words cut me, yes, but it was my silence that let them scar. Not anymore." She tore the page out, folded it carefully, and tucked it into her wallet. Not because she needed the reminder, but because it had taken her this long to stop being a ghost in her own life, and she wasn't going back. Rachel always thought of survival as staying quiet, staying polite, staying easy to love. But in the weeks following her confrontation with Lauren, her internal definition changed. Survival, she realized, wasn't endurance at any cost. It wasn't gritting her teeth through humiliation and calling it peace. It wasn't absorbing disrespect like rain and hoping not to drown. Survival was shedding what didn't serve her, even if it made things harder before they got better. And that included the marriage she had once made her whole identity. Their house didn't look any different. The same off-white walls, the same pale blue sofa, the coffee mug still hung in the same order, but something had shifted between the floorboards and the photographs. Rachel had changed, grown, claimed space, and she could feel the tension that came with that. Daniel noticed it too. Not as resentment, but as recalibration. They were still married, but not to the same people they once were. One evening after dinner, Daniel rinsed plates while Rachel dried them. "I keep thinking about how much I leaned on your calm," he said, handing her a plate. "It felt like a comfort. But maybe it was a blind spot." Rachel met his eyes. "It was both. I thought I was supporting you by not reacting when things got tense, but now I get that I was just avoiding discomfort." Rachel folded the dish towel. "You weren't the only one. I was avoiding myself." They'd begun to relearn each other, slowly. Daniel started asking questions he'd never thought to ask before. "What did you actually want that day?" Or, "How did that make you feel?" Questions Rachel had once trained herself not to expect. And Rachel began to answer, not to manage his feelings, not to smooth the edges, but honestly. Some answers made him quiet, some made her cry, but everyone stitched something back together between them. Not what had been, but something new. Still, Rachel had to admit, healing changed her more than it changed Daniel. He was growing, yes, he was showing up, trying, adjusting. But she was rebuilding from rubble. He was adding depth. She was creating an entirely new foundation. One night, she lay in bed while Daniel read beside her. The lamp cast soft shadows on the wall, and the room felt still. "I feel like we're still us," Daniel said quietly, "but the version that comes after the storm." Rachel looked at him. "I'm not sure I want to be that same us anymore." His eyes flicked to hers. "I don't mean I want to leave," she added. "I just mean I don't want to return to what we were. That woman, I respect her, but I buried too much to keep things easy." Daniel exhaled. "You're not her anymore." "I don't think I can be." "Then we figure out who we are now," he said. "Together." They started making small changes. Rachel reclaimed her Sundays, no more obligatory brunches or family check-ins unless she wanted to. She started visiting bookstores again, lingering for hours. She journaled, sometimes for 10 pages without stopping. She picked up painting, something she hadn't done since college. At first, Daniel tiptoed around her time. "Is now a good time to talk? Want me to join you, or leave you be?" He was learning that her space was sacred, not rejection, and she was learning that asking for space didn't make her unlovable, it made her whole. At work, Rachel took the lead on a new client project. She spoke up without padding her ideas in disclaimers. She corrected a coworker in a meeting, not cruelly but clearly. Afterward, her boss said, "You've really stepped into your voice this quarter." Rachel smiled. "I finally stopped waiting for permission." Marcy noticed the change too. Over dinner, she said, "You used to second-guess every sentence. Now you sit in your words like you trust them." Rachel laughed. "I used to treat confidence like a costume. Now I know it's just showing up as myself even when it's uncomfortable." Still, Rachel had moments where she grieved the old version of herself, the one who was so agreeable, so easy to love, so willing to make herself smaller if it meant keeping the peace. She missed the praise that came with being low maintenance, but she didn't miss the ache. The hollow feeling after another social gathering where someone made a sharp remark, and she laughed along to keep the air light. The nights she sat in bed wondering if Daniel even saw her anymore, or just appreciated her smooth edges. That version of herself had worked so hard to survive, but this version wanted to live. One afternoon, Rachel found an old voicemail on her phone. It was from their first year of marriage. Daniel had called her from work. "Hey babe, just wanted to say I love you. Also, you're amazing for how you handle my family. Seriously, you keep everything from blowing up." She listened twice. She didn't delete it, but she did rename it in her files. Before. That evening, Daniel found her on the patio. He handed her a tea and sat beside her. "You've been quiet lately," he said. "Not withdrawn," she clarified. "Just still." "I know the difference now," he said. "I used to panic when you weren't cheerful." Rachel smiled. "I used to think I had to be cheerful to be loved." They clinked mugs. She looked at him, really looked. Her marriage had made it through. But she was the one who'd had to break and rebuild, and she had no intention of shrinking back into the person she used to be. Journal entry: "My marriage survived, but the version of me who let things slide? She didn't make it. I buried her. With love, with gratitude, with finality. In her place is a woman who asks hard questions, who sets hard boundaries, who speaks and expects to be heard. She is quieter, but not afraid. Softer, but not small. She survived too, but differently." Rachel used to think healing meant getting back to her old self, back to the easy version of herself everyone liked. The agreeable wife, the gracious daughter-in-law, the woman who knew when to speak gently, when to make herself smaller, and when to disappear altogether for the sake of peace. But healing wasn't a rewind button, it wasn't a return. It was a door that led somewhere new. And walking through it meant leaving old versions of herself behind, even the ones that had once felt essential to her identity. It had been nearly 5 months since the barbecue. 5 months since Lauren's words pierced the air like a blade. "If you disappeared tomorrow, no one would even notice." At the time, Rachel hadn't responded. She hadn't even flinched. But since that day, everything had shifted. Her silence had ended, and the life she built afterward didn't look like the one she had before. Now, on a Sunday morning, Rachel stood barefoot in the kitchen of her home, sunlight spilling across the countertops as she made coffee. Daniel walked in behind her and pressed a soft kiss to the back of her neck. "Want to go for a hike later?" he asked. "Maybe," she replied, "but I was thinking I'd spend the afternoon alone. I've got a lot I want to write." He nodded without hesitation. "Sounds good." No guilt, no tension, no need for over-explaining. That was new. That was healing. Rachel had started writing again, really writing, not just journaling in bursts of emotion, but structured, deliberate storytelling. Her voice was clearer now, stronger. She'd even submitted an essay to a regional magazine, one about boundaries and womanhood, and the quiet pain of being called too sensitive by people who claimed to love you. The editor responded with praise and a request for more. She was stunned, not because she didn't believe in her voice, but because for years she hadn't used it. She'd swallowed her stories so that others could stay comfortable. Not anymore. She spent that afternoon at her favorite park with a notebook and a coffee. No music, no distractions. She wrote about a woman who spent her life folding herself smaller and smaller to fit inside everyone else's comfort zones. Until one day, she couldn't shrink anymore without disappearing completely. Halfway through, Rachel stopped and stared out over the lake. It was quiet. Birds chirped. Kids laughed somewhere behind her. She exhaled and whispered aloud, "This is what healing sounds like." Not perfection, not total peace, but presence. Back at home, Daniel was in the garage sorting through old boxes. Rachel walked in, wiping her hands on her jeans. "Find anything interesting?" He held up a dusty photo album. "From our first apartment. Want to look?" She hesitated, then nodded. "Okay." They sat on the garage floor, flipping through images of their early days. Mismatched furniture, takeout containers, Rachel in oversized t-shirts, Daniel with his awkward college haircut. She laughed. "God, we had no idea what we were doing." Daniel smiled. "We really didn't." Then his tone softened. "Do you ever miss that version of us?" Rachel thought for a moment. "I miss the hope," she said, "but not the way I disappeared to protect it." Daniel looked at her seriously. "You're not disappearing anymore." "I know," she said. "That's why I can stay." The next day, Rachel got a call from Lauren. She stared at the screen for a long moment before answering. "Hey," she said flatly. Lauren's voice was unusually soft. "I heard about your essay. Mom sent it to me." Rachel froze. "I didn't realize," Lauren said. I knew I was tough on you, but I didn't realize how much it hurt." Rachel stayed silent. Lauren continued, "I guess I'm calling to say, I'm sorry, I really am." Rachel felt something loosen in her chest, but she didn't rush in to make Lauren feel better. Instead, she asked, "Do you know what you're sorry for?" A pause. "For thinking your silence meant consent," Lauren said. "For never seeing you." Rachel closed her eyes. "Thank you," she said finally. And she meant it. Later that evening, Rachel shared the call with Daniel. He was surprised, but not skeptical. "She's changing too," he said. "Maybe," Rachel replied. "But that's not what I'm focused on." "What are you focused on?" "Myself," she said. "That used to feel selfish. Now it just feels overdue." A few days later, she and Marcy met up at their usual brunch spot. Rachel filled her in on the call, the writing, and her growing desire to maybe, just maybe, start her own blog. Marcy grinned. "Let me know when you do. I'll be your first subscriber." "You really think I can do it?" Rachel asked. Marcy leaned in. "Rachel, you've been doing it your whole life. You just finally started signing your name." That night, Rachel walked into the bathroom and caught her reflection in the mirror. She didn't see a woman who'd been broken or betrayed. She didn't see someone who had to prove her worth to anyone anymore. She saw someone who had survived without vanishing. She saw someone who had healed not by returning to her old self, but by becoming someone new. Someone honest, someone awake, someone free. Journal entry. Healing isn't a time machine. It's not a rewind to before the pain. It's a renovation. A reconstruction with steel beams and new windows. I am not who I was before. I am better, stronger, real. I lost the version of myself who thought survival meant silence. And in her place, I found a woman who understands. Peace is not the absence of noise. It's the presence of truth, and truth sounds like me. There was something strange about being listened to, truly listened to, after years of invisibility. Rachel had grown used to the glazed-over expressions, the polite nods, the way people would let her finish speaking just long enough to pivot the conversation back to themselves. For a long time, she'd accepted that, believed it was normal. But now, after all the breaking, rebuilding, and boundary setting, something had shifted. When she spoke now, people stopped what they were doing. Their posture changed. They leaned in. They asked follow-up questions. It wasn't just that she was louder. It was that she meant every word. And she no longer softened her edges to make others feel at ease. The realization hit her one afternoon during a company meeting. Rachel was presenting a new project pitch. Nothing flashy, just a budget breakdown and a vision plan. But halfway through, the regional director interrupted. "I think this timeline's a little aggressive," he said. Rachel looked him in the eye and said, "I disagree. This isn't aggressive, it's efficient, unless you'd like to add 2 extra weeks of internal delay, which will increase costs." The room went quiet, and then the director, someone who used to wave her off with barely concealed condescension, nodded. "You're right. Proceed." Rachel barely blinked. This was who she was now. That night she told Daniel about it over dinner. "I don't think I've changed what I say," she said, pushing a piece of broccoli around her plate. "I think I've just stopped asking permission to say it." Daniel smiled. "You're not managing everyone's emotions anymore." "I used to read the room like it was my job," she said. "Now, I read myself first." He raised his glass. "To clarity." They clinked. Rachel started noticing it everywhere. At work, colleagues deferred to her expertise. At book club, people waited for her thoughts. Even Marcy, her best friend, who had always been kind and supportive, now looked at Rachel with a sort of reverence she hadn't before. "I don't know how to explain it," Marcy said one evening. "You walk into a room differently now." Rachel laughed. "I think I finally believe I belong in it." The real test came when Daniel's mother invited them to dinner. Lauren would be there. Rachel hesitated, not out of fear, but out of clarity. She needed to be sure she wasn't walking into another trap, another situation where she'd be expected to laugh off old wounds and play nice for dessert. Daniel sat beside her on the couch as she read the text. "You don't have to go," he said, "and if you do, I'll be right there." Rachel took a deep breath. "I'll go," she said, "but only because I'm curious to see what happens when I don't make myself small." They arrived at the Monroe home at 6:03 p.m. Lauren opened the door. Her smile was tight, but present. "Hi," she said. "Thanks for coming." Rachel didn't smile back. She nodded. "Hi, Lauren." Inside, the usual family noise hummed. TV on low, Daniel's father tinkering with something in the garage, plates being set out in the kitchen. Dinner started cordially enough. Light conversation, safe topics. Then Lauren mentioned the essay. "I saw your article," she said, her tone unreadable. Rachel set her fork down. "Then you know it wasn't about revenge," she said. "It was about reclaiming something I'd given away for too long." Lauren nodded slowly. "I get that now." "Good," Rachel said, voice steady, "because I'm not interested in pretending anymore, and if you ever speak to me like you used to, I'll leave, quietly but completely." Daniel looked at her, proud but cautious. "And Lauren?" Lauren nodded. Not defensively, not mockingly, respectfully. "Understood," she said. For once, Rachel believed her. They left early, not because it was awkward, because they'd said everything that needed to be said. In the car, Daniel reached for her hand. "You didn't flinch," he said. Rachel looked out the window. "I didn't have to," she replied. "I have nothing to prove anymore." At home, Rachel lit a candle, poured herself a glass of wine, and opened her laptop. She'd been working on a longer piece, something more personal than anything she'd published so far. A narrative about how women are taught to please first, feel second, and how dangerous that hierarchy becomes over time. As she typed, the words flowed like water. Her voice wasn't careful anymore. It was clear, clean, unapologetic. Journal entry. "When I used to speak, people tolerated me. Now they listen. Not because I changed my language, but because I stopped asking them to accept me. I speak like someone who knows her worth. Because I finally do, and the world is learning to respond in kind.